Okay. And we're going.
Okay.
I thought that I should announce it.
Okay.
Welcome to Movie Butters, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I like introducing the show when Dustin's in the middle of a drink.
Sorry. What's up, everyone?
We're still very organized, as you can tell. Nothing has changed.
It's true.
Let's see. I don't even know what our housekeeping is. I'm so disorganized right now.
That's
Housekeeping stuff you should know. Recently launched, the Movie Boners fan club is live and accepting members. There's a link in the bio, link in the description, link everywhere, movieboners.com. If you are caught up and want new episodes, bonus episodes that only members get, very exclusive and a completely different format and really, really fun, more engaging, I think. And if you want access to live streams and you can interact with us and other members during the recording and discounts on merch and exclusive merch and a bunch of other things, giveaways, you should sign up and help support this show, help us make it better. And we would really appreciate that.
Hell yeah, we would.
If you're listening for the first time, you're probably asking, who cares? I don't even know if I like this show yet. And I hope you stick around because I hope you like it.
We hope you stick around. We've been told that we actually make a pretty good, fun show. So
yeah,
we're going to take their word for it.
All 7 people cannot be wrong at the same time. There's probably a funnier way to transition to that, but let's transition to the movie draft while we're at it. Like I said, very disorganized.
Yeah.
The thing about the movie draft, though, is you are still losing, but you crossed $1 billion finally.
I did.
It took you having every movie in May to get there, and I did not have any movies come out in over a month, and I'm almost at 2 billion. But the IMDb average is still very close. It's what is that? 12 hundredths of a point apart, a little less, a little more, I guess. And that is helped, I think, on your part because I had my first really official bad movie come out. Well, since Argyle. Argyle was my first movie, and it definitely was not great, mid at best. The Watchers apparently is in the same boat. It's at a 5.8 on IMDb.
Heard a lot of hate about that movie.
Yeah, still don't know what it's about. I don't know how much of that. You have to wonder how much of that is related to M. Night Shyamalan because it is put out by his daughter. It's her first feature film. And it's based on a book. Don't know anything about the book. But just having the Shyamalan name, maybe people are more critical of it, but maybe it's not. I haven't seen it. I don't know. I'm interested in seeing it for sure.
I don't know. I'm curious to watch it, but it's probably one that I'll watch when they put it on Prime, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was a movie, and then I'll watch that.
yeah, I'm probably in the same boat, honestly. I was surprised that I had taken it in the draft when I went to go update all of our scores. I was like, oh no, I took The Watchers.
Shit.
Yeah, it was my last official movie at the 12th round, but. Yeah. It was still probably not the best one to take. But I also took Inside Out 2.
Right.
And Inside Out 2, even though I'm seeing a lot of mixed reviews on it, it has an 8.0 on IMDb and very high critics and audience ratings. They're agreeing pretty much on Rotten Tomatoes. And it has almost 300 million in the first weekend. I think it came out Thursday.
Which I think everyone kind of expected to happen.
Yeah, maybe a week. Maybe it's been a week at this point. But yeah, it's. I don't know if it'll save Disney Pixar, but it didn't hurt them like Wish and the other movies last year did.
Well, there's been some encouraging things coming out of the Pixar and Disney camps. A lot of their heads have been coming out and bashing, kind of the way that the company has been making films. The head of Pixar flat out said, "We are not making live action remakes. We only want original content," which I thought, thank God.
Yeah, that is a very strong turn of events, I think.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah, I didn't know until this week that Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling were not returning for the sequel because Disney only offered him $100,000, and they said it was insulting.
Yeah.
Because I think and then Disney said, or Pixar said, the only star we feel we need to bring back is Amy Poehler, and they gave her like $5 million or something to come back. And yeah, if I was them, I would not care at all. But I really enjoyed both of them as Disgust and Fear in the first one.
I didn't even realize they changed that until I was just kind of looking at like the IMDb page of it before it came out. It's like, wait a minute, who are these people?
Yeah, yeah, some new faces in there for sure. So that's where we're at. Things are looking all right. About halfway through the year at this point, I am seeing more and more promotion for the first part of Horizon American Saga, and I'm getting kind of hyped for it.
I am excited for it. I'll give you that credit. It's kind of cool to see Costner with that Western style again.
Yeah, and I just think it's exciting to get two movies that are related in the same year, like 2 months apart. That's pretty exciting.
I don't necessarily have high hopes that it's going to actually do anything at the box office. So
yeah,
I guess it's got one of the lowest projections for like a major film.
Mm-hmm. I don't think Westerns typically even do well. But
yeah, they don't.
As long as I like it, I guess.
But it should be a cool movie regardless.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that comes out the same day as A Quiet Place Day One, your other movie. So I think that's what's up on deck coming soon.
One of these halfway through, I gotta pass you somehow with something. Yeah. God damn it!
Yeah, I think that something will be Deadpool 3, like you said last time. if anything, I mean, you have a lot of heavy hitters. We'll talk about Joker, Folie, Deux tonight, I'm sure, and then Beetlejuice 2, people are hyped for. Sonic 3, Wicked. You've got some bangers out there, so don't give up hope. Potential bangers. Potential bangers.
Potential. Yeah.
What new stuff have you seen lately?
I watched a handful of new things. I had to watch Hitman, that new-ish at the time of recording. Glenn Powell, right? Yeah, his new movie on Netflix. It's based on a true story of this professor who has a side job as like helping the FBI or the police like tap potential hired killers.
Yeah, it's just like their tech guy.
And then he gets promoted to play the role of a hitman, and he gets caught up in stuff that's bigger than him. It was actually a lot of fun. I'm a little shocked it's got like such high ratings, like 97% on Rotten Tomatoes and all this. It's not a bad movie. It's very entertaining. He does a great job. I was just kind of shocked that it's that high. Typically a comedy like that is not that high.
Yeah. I saw it too. Well, I saw most of it. I haven't finished it yet because I got tired and went to sleep instead. Yeah, but I was enjoying it. But I also was in the same camp that I was like, it's not incredible. Like I don't know why it's so high on the ratings on a lot of things. So maybe temper your expectations. But it's fun and enjoyable. And I will say Glenn Powell and all of his different costumes and voices and everything, he crushes it. It's incredible.
Yeah, it was definitely entertaining. I don't have anything against it. I was just kind of shocked, like straight to stream service comedy on Netflix has that rating. All right.
Yeah.
Good on you, Glenn. Good on you. And then I had to watch because I saw a bunch of hype like articles about it, and it seemed cheesy to me, so I figured, all right, let's see what you got. So I watched that Under Paris movie that's also on Netflix about the shark
thing.
Yeah. It's okay. Like at no point is it intense or free. It's like Jaws with some terrible CGI blood. I don't know. Jaws does the intensity better. Sorry.
Big surprise. One of the
Right.
most heralded movies of all time is a little better.
But it was entertaining still. Like, it wasn't bad. It was kind of like a fun mixture of Jaws and Deep Blue Sea, which was fun for me to watch because I'm a fan of both.
Yeah.
And then I don't know why, Jake, but I ended up watching Night Swim.
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
like,
Horror movie from earlier this year.
yeah, that just got blasted as being this horrendous film. And I was like, I was doing other stuff and I needed something just to watch and have that. I was like, I probably don't have to actually pay attention to it, but I just want something and I needed something new for this.
Mhm.
So I was like, well, it can't be that bad, right? No, it's so bad. It's so bad.
Oh,
Like,
no.
There were so many moments I was like, they're not. Nope, they are. It can't actually get worse, right? Oh, it did. Okay.
Oh, no.
Oh, man, dude. By the time the credits rolled, I was like, good Lord, that might be one of the worst horror films I've ever seen. It's so bad.
Okay.
So
Wow.
that was terrible. And then
Was it like character based, or the villain is terrible, or just all of it?
just all
Effects?
it's I mean it's like they watched
Soup.
it's like they watched Amityville Horror
Uh-huh.
and thought to themselves, how can we try to rip off of this story? And then at the same time, they were watching like The Happening and were like, what if we
Interesting.
like ripped off of stuff on this and did it worse, and then ripped off of stuff in this and also did it so much worse?
Wow.
And then they thought, but you know what the cherry on top needs to be is when we do the reveal, it has to be just the most laugh out loud, horrible reveal ever in this genre. And they kind of achieved it.
Okay.
How
That's
this one got greenlit, I honestly think James Wan only had his name attached to it because he's like contracted to, since he's with Blumhouse. So
yeah, for sure.
and then I've seen the whole franchise. I didn't really have a desire to see this, but I thought, why not? The kid is out of town, so I'm not going to go and see the family film. So I'm going to go and watch just a 2-hour action flick. So I went and saw Bad Boys Ride or Die.
Nice.
And it was a lot of fun.
Did it kick ass?
It's so much fun. The comedy is great. The action is cool. There's a couple parts that are weird that I didn't really care for, but like I got out of it and thought, man, for a franchise that's already kind of like okay, like the first one's cool. The second one is like, good God, Michael Bay, what you do. And the third one is, I think a lot of people forget about it, but this one was a lot of fun. So good job, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. You made a really good summer blockbuster, and good job on Will Smith for working at getting his public opinion boosted back up. So
that's the biggest thing I've seen is everybody's like, oh, we thought you would be canceled after that, and apparently nobody cared about the slap anymore. Like, like, hey man, if you make a good movie, you are back in our good graces.
Yeah, it was a good time. Like, I'm glad I went and saw it. It really has great callbacks to the first movie. There's some fun cameos in it, but it was a fun action movie. I'm like,
okay.
Yeah, I'm liking the fun action stuff that we've gotten this year. So
I don't think I saw the third one, which is confusingly called Bad Boys for Life. Do I need to see the third one in order to see this one?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Like,
I'll get that done.
There's several characters that are directly from the third one that the whole time you'd be like, who the fuck are these people and why am I supposed to care? You would care after you saw the third one. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That is helpful. You talking about the Paris shark movie made me remember that Tommy Wiseau's shark movie is supposed to come out soon.
Yes.
Big Shark. So I was Googling it and mostly listening to you for most of what you were saying.
Yeah, I know you
And
weren't.
and apparently it premiered in March of this year
Oh, shit.
and in Oregon. And after he did like a bunch of re-editing and final cut, quote unquote, of it, so it's supposed to be the final cut version in March. But I don't think it says when the actual movie is supposed to come out. But I'm itching to see that movie. It looks phenomenal.
I know he announced it last year, and I got really excited about that. So I think when it officially comes out,
that trailer is incredible.
Yes, I think we're gonna have to do like a fun little watch thing on that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that would be great. Maybe like a live reaction while watching it. Kind of thing.
Yes,
that would be really funny. Okay, I didn't really watch anything new. I did watch Hitman like you did. Nice and easy to do since it was on streaming. I watched an old kids movie that probably nobody cares about called Planes and is somewhat related to the Cars animation.
God, I forgot about that movie.
I remember it getting dragged through the mud when it first came out.
Yeah,
but I'm not gonna lie.
A Cars ripoff with Dane Cook, right?
Yeah. Dane Cook is the main voice, and I was like, "Is this Dane Cook?" And it definitely is. But it's not terrible. Like it's maybe the fact that I'm watching it with a 2-year-old that's running around the house, and I'm partly watching it and partly not. It wasn't bad. I thought it was fine and enjoyable, and it gave me everything I needed to out of it. And honestly, I kind of enjoyed it better than the first Cars or the second Cars. Cars 2 is like really complicated, and I don't understand why. And I haven't seen the third one. But anyway, Planes is all right. And then you don't care about the other things I watched. I watched... there's a show called Perfect Match on Netflix. Oh my
God, I was literally about to be like, you watched one of those terrible dating shows, didn't you?
No, this is the king of terrible dating shows, because what Perfect Match is about. So I've talked about Love Is Blind on the show before, and that's a Netflix dating show where the people are in pods and they don't get to see each other and they fall in love and have to get married like right after. But apparently there's a bunch of other Netflix dating shows that I've never even heard of. And so what this show does, Perfect Match, is it takes all of the worst offenders and trouble and sluts and man-sluts and all of the sluts from those shows, puts them in a house, and they have to like find their quote-unquote perfect match by coupling up immediately. And then they bring in new people like randomly and then see at the end of each like night, they need to decide, hey, do you still want to be a couple, or do you want to jump ship and try to be with somebody else and say they're your perfect match? And then at the end of it, you win some bogus vacation or something. But anyway, if you love drama and trashiness, it is up my alley, which I'm sure loses me some points on a lot of different charts, but that's all I've watched, basically.
You just binged the Perfect Match.
Yeah.
With some planes spliced into there randomly.
Yes. And today's movie, whenever you're listening to this movie, we're talking about Joker.
Yep.
Which I know it was obviously critically acclaimed, but I also think has a lot of controversy around it, maybe even misunderstanding around it. And we thought with Folie, Deux, the sequel coming out, is a good time to actually get into it and deep dive it. Yeah. So before we get into spoilers, what do you think in general terms of Joker? Do you like it? Do you not like it?
I love it.
Okay.
I absolutely love this movie.
I've heard a lot of people not like it. I like it as well.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. And I'm always curious about it because I feel like even with Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix and Warner Brothers, everyone associated with the movie when it was coming out, everyone was making it a point to be like, it's not comic books. You are not seeing superheroes. Batman will not be appearing in the film. Like, trying to make it very clear It's not going to be a typical comic book movie.
Yeah, set your expectations appropriately.
Yeah, and
Don't hate this movie.
I feel like there was still a lot of people that went into it expecting to see like Commissioner Gordon or something, and it's like, dude, this takes place when Gordon might even be like a young kid joining the force. Like,
yeah, maybe at the academy.
Right, like not the same thing.
Yeah.
If that's not why people don't like it, then it's probably just not their style of film. I think it's such a departure from what Todd Phillips is kind of known for prior to Joker. You know, he did the Hangover series, he did Due Date, he's done a lot of comedy.
Road Trip,
Road Trip and Old School. And for him to go from that to Joker, I think there's nothing really funny in Joker.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's not a movie you sit down and you're like, it's kind of like Requiem for a Dream, right? Where it's like, you don't sit down to be entertained and feel good, because at no point during the course of the film are you going to feel good.
Yeah.
It just kind of gets heavier and heavier, but I kind of get why some people don't like it. I love it. I think the whole idea of like this style of portrayal of severe mental illness, kind of unchecked or unsupported, is really intense and adds a lot to it. But the more I watch it, the more I kind of take that it's not just that. It's more of like people in general or society kind of unchecked, or when people have given up on each other as a whole, but still expect people to hand out stuff, like the dangers and how quick and terrible that fall can be. That's kind of what I take from it these days, but I love it. I think it's such an intense film.
Yeah, it's very intense and very, like, as a Batman fan, and we're both massive Batman fans, and we've seen every iteration of a Joker that there's ever been on screen or in comics, and I think it's fine to say that it's a comic book movie and a Batman movie because it is in Gotham and involves the Joker.
Thomas Wayne is a prominent character in the story. Yeah,
so it pulls heavily from the lore, but also there have been very different versions of Joker. There's been the Cesar Romero 60s version. There's been, in the comics, there's been alternate Jokers who like cut off the face of the real Joker and wear it on their face. I don't remember if that was the Rebirth timeline or what that was, but
it was, yeah.
It gets pretty, there's a lot of variety, and I don't think that there's any reason to say, oh, this isn't really Joker. It can be. It definitely can be. And I think DC is right in approaching it the way that they're approaching it, with kind of the Elseworld stories that they're doing. It's not part of the canon and the main universe, but it's still valid and part of the culture, I guess, of the comic book culture.
Yeah.
And the movie itself, it has so many broad and deep themes in it, not just about culture in general, but also about individuals and their coping mechanisms and mental health issues, and kind of holds up a bright light to it, kind of like you were saying. And so I think it is the most intense and I think noteworthy comic book movie that we've had since maybe The Dark Knight, that everyone was like, wow, this is different and phenomenal and has so much substance to it that it made people actually pay attention in a world where we kind of stopped paying attention to superhero movies for a while. And it's reflected in the box office. For a movie with a $55 million budget, it made over $1 billion for an R-rated movie, and I don't think anybody expected that.
Oh no, it's the only R-rated film, or it's the first R-rated film in history that crossed the $1 billion box office, which is huge. And then you add on to it, like you said, it cost $55 million to make. So the fact that this cheap comic book film that is like a whole separate Elseworld kind of thing, where it's like, yeah, it's it's Gotham City. Don't expect to see all the people you think you're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it became this huge thing. I remember after I saw it in the theater, like it was that kind of movie where when you told people that opening weekend, like, "Oh, I saw Joker," people
Mm-hmm.
had kind of an adverse reaction of like, "Oh shit, like, is it good? Like, what is
Yeah.
it?" And I remember telling people like, "It's amazing, but you might need something that's going to be like a very deep palate cleanser kind of lined up right after it. Like you're going to need
Mm-hmm.
something to kind of boost your mood because you're going to feel low."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think it's the kind of movie that pulls so much from the real world as well. It's not the kind of movie that you can necessarily just leave in the theater like most comic
right.
book movies. That it does draw very much from real life and real late night shows and real politics and real mental health issues and all that stuff. It's very grounded, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. I think that the look of it, especially taking it back in time and setting it in the 70s, and there's a lot of questions around kind of who Batman will look like, who the Joker will look like. I remember part of that aversion from fan base is it seems like the Batman fan base is very much like the James Bond fan base, where everybody's like, as soon as somebody gets cast, they're like, no, not that guy. No, that guy can't pull it off. It happened with Heath Ledger, and then everybody promptly shut up as soon as that came out,
And rightfully so.
and then this movie is pretty bold to follow because you see Joaquin Phoenix and you're like, yeah, he's a great actor, but also can he pull it off and can he match the huge energy that Heath Ledger had? And what is his laugh going to be like? Is it going to be weird? Is it going to be, am I going to take it seriously and all that stuff? And as soon as it starts, I mean, the first scene after the title card is him laughing, but it's so different and so
It's
the way that he
painful.
like seems like he's in pain and struggling to suppress it and all that stuff. It's such a different kind of laugh that you immediately don't associate it with anything that came before it, and it is its own thing, but it's also really, really good.
Yeah. I thought that ended up being one of my, and it still is one of my favorite aspects of this version of Joker is the laugh and the fact that they made it where it's like an actual disease where in high stress situations his mind just reverts to forcing this laughter. And I love how he clutches his chest and he gags and he's like it sounds like he's actually choking at times. I think that's one of the smartest decisions they made going for this style of Joker, because it immediately makes you kind of like, you don't relate to him, but you, how do I word this without sounding like, you feel for him, but it's not necessarily for him. It's almost like an immediate, just for those struggling, you feel for them, because you know his journey is going to go down a violent one and an unwell path. So you're not, it's such an interesting film in that aspect where like your title character, he's a villain. He's one of the greatest villains ever put to page and on screen. And you're like, I can't root for him, but they're the mental health stuff, the abuse that you end up learning about, just the whole structure of how they tell his story at this juncture in his life. You're like, I get it. Like you definitely have that where you're just, man, when life is just constantly kicking you down and every time you keep trying to force yourself to smile, something new comes along to just beat you down even more. Like, yeah, it's going to get rough. And if no one helps, or if you don't ask for that help, like the consequences of that can be dire.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
showing Joker in that aspect was really smart, going from the laugh. I know I kind of like really veered, but I just think that's one of the coolest things that they could have done, and the smartest thing that they could have done. I mean, how do you make a villain how do you make your audience sympathize with a villain? You don't. You just make them understand consequences.
Right.
And I think that's the brilliance of this movie, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think when you said that you feel for him, like you are trying to figure out if he's the protagonist of the story or not, because he is the most famous villain ever at the same time. Not even just in comics, like in all DC, in all of Marvel, in all TV, really in all of movies, the Joker, everybody knows.
Everyone knows the Joker.
A very, very bad guy, and never really has had any redeemable qualities. And I think this version of the Joker also doesn't have any redeemable qualities, but he also has factors in his life that lead him to become the Joker and accept that mantle. Really, it seems like the laugh from the beginning, where he is very much trying to suppress it, trying to hold it in, choking on it. That is part of his overall arc into finally accepting becoming the Joker, and finally accepting the laugh and using it as opposed to resisting it.
Yeah.
The whole span of the movie, and it's just one of many things that he kind of decides to do that with. It's not really like a allegory for it. It's just one of the components of his life, and which becomes a component of his villainness
persona, or
his gimmick.
Yeah.
To put it in wrestling terms, it's always easier if you put things in wrestling terms.
Only for you.
So yeah, I guess you want to get into spoilers. We're going to spoil Joker if you haven't seen it from 2019.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of movie with huge spoilers, but also it's well worth seeing the movie well before we hear us talk about it.
I think, and we'll get to it, but I still remember the shock and the dread and just that gut-wrenching feeling during the last 10 minutes of the film that first time you see it, because it's just like it takes the last 15 minutes, really, the turn that it takes is just so like, holy crap, we're actually watching the point of no return. Like, he's officially like severed ties with this part of his life, and now this is him. But we'll get to that. Yeah, just let's do it, man. Okay.
So yeah, I think the style is, of course, the most prominent thing.
I love that 70s style.
Particularly leaning into the old Warner Brothers logo at the beginning. I just love everything about it. And people have criticized it for obviously ripping off of Scorsese and ripping off of Taxi Driver and the stand-up comedy one he did, which I can't remember off the top of my head.
Oh my god!
I
think it's just called The Comic, isn't it?
No, hold on.
No, it's not. It's
It's called. Oh
my god.
Well, now I'm just getting things about him talking about comic books, because he is notoriously ripped on Marvel stuff. The King of Comedy.
There
the King
it is.
Of Comedy.
Yeah,
1982.
See, saying that he's ripping off of it, I didn't take it as ripping off of it. Todd Phillips was pretty open about like Scorsese, especially early Scorsese, was such a huge influence on this film.
Yeah.
So hearing that and then seeing 1970s Gotham was really exciting to me. One, Gotham is fictitious.
Right.
So it was cool seeing like, well, what did Gotham look like in the 70s? Like that could be really cool. And it is so dirty. It was like, to me, it was like, oh, so this is what the streets look like in Taxi Driver in the daylight. Like that's what it felt like to me. And I didn't take it as ripping off. I just took it as like, that was, that makes sense why Taxi Driver would be an influence.
Yeah, I think it perfectly aligns with not only the style that they're going for, but the themes and characters. And if you want people to understand, immediately the situation they're in and the character they're looking at, associating it with something they already know is a great way to do that, because they'll just mentally make that connection and it'll click for them a little bit faster. And so I don't have a problem with that either. I think it looks really, really cool. I think the city looks really, really cool. And I think the background stuff of just normal life and the trash, garbage, like outage or strike or whatever that's going on, and seeing garbage piled up like to the tops of the first story of buildings and stuff is great visual allegory to just the trashy nature of all of the people around them, and and how people are getting more and more fed up with stuff as things escalate and become more and more uncomfortable and terrible, and then they start to look for anybody to take the blame and also anybody to help them out of it, which is of course the whole arc of the story.
And for comic fans, for Batman comic fans, like, it's very cool to see Gotham in this light, and it kind of helps bring to light, like, every time that we've ever heard Bruce talk about Gotham just being in disarray, and he's got to try and figure out how to like fight for it because there's still something good in it. Seeing the streets piled with the trash, seeing how the citizens in the city are just so desperate from the get-go, like they've never had actual inspiration, to the point where they're desperate for anything, so they lean into the violent nature and lean into seeing Arthur as their symbol. So I love the flip of it, where it's like, oh yeah, because societies like this have to crumble, like they're gonna fall, so this is like the fall.
And in the absence of Batman, in the absence of a good symbol, then they will clutch to any symbol that they can find, and that symbol needs to portray some sort of quality. If it's not going to be justice, if it's not going to be goodness, then even if it's nepotism or not nepotism, but like what's the thing when you're like super obsessed with yourself and
vanity, or
more of like a condition, like a
narcissism.
Like if it's so super narcissistic or super just self-absorption or things like that, and the whole hate the rich mentality and all of that stuff, that is just looking for someone to blame, whether they're good or not, or helpful or not. And comic book fans, I think, know that Thomas Wayne and the Wayne Foundation did a lot of private improvements to the whole city and public transit and all of that stuff to make life better before he died. And so this is definitely an interesting point to jump into the story when you're at the beginning, kind of before any of that happened, and the city hopefully improves, and then also before he dies, and then the city takes a dive again, and Bruce needs to come up and save it. I think it's definitely a perfect time to see it. But the timeline is definitely something that everybody talks about, because you're like, if the Joker, quote unquote, the Joker is this guy in his 30s, Arthur Fleck, that we meet, then, and Bruce is like 7 or whatever he is. How does that work? How do I make this fit the thing that I know? People I think have trouble with that. Do you have a opinion or a theory? Because I have a couple.
I do. They're kind of weird to me. Because the only one that like really makes sense to me would be that this would be, I guess, technically like the OG Joker for the Batman universe. But when Bruce comes back as Batman, someone else would take up like, oh, this guy's trying to do this, but we're still stuck, or I'm still stuck as this mentality being, because there's always fanatics out there
Yeah.
like
That
the
take
dangerous
inspiration from some other
and
serial killer or somebody before them.
so you could almost say like there would be Batman would still have his own Joker. It would just be someone who's taking what Fleck does and ramping it up to be the the slap against Batman's mission. Like he wants to build it. Joker always wants to tear it down. It's a game for him. He thinks it's hilarious.
Right.
So that one is really the only one that really, if you need a Batman timeline, that's the one that fits the most to me. Is that Batman would still have his Joker, it just wouldn't be Arthur Fleck's Joker.
Yeah, that this one can be the inspiration for the one that everybody knows and the one that probably takes it even further in the future. Yeah, that's what I think as well, as far as if you need to make it fit some known timeline, then that works the best. I think the other option is it doesn't matter. And this is a story about like, what if it's kind of a what if story. What if Joker was born earlier and then Batman wasn't around to prevent what he would do? What would that city look like? And could he take over? And when he took over, what would happen?
Yeah.
And I think that that's also an interesting, just a question to ask and a story to tell. You don't need the timeline to even match up or Bruce to ever become Batman, even in this world.
And this movie's done so well, in my opinion, to the point where, like, as a Batman fan, I don't need Batman to show up in this movie. That's not the point of this movie. So I just automatically know, like, that's not what we're being shown. That's not the story being told. This is like what you said, that second one of like, it doesn't matter. This is the world. If Batman wasn't there and the Joker was allowed to just do what he wanted, this is the world that he would create. So I go more with that. Like, it just doesn't matter. This isn't you're not watching this movie for Batman. If you did, you're really disappointed. So
yeah, I'm kind of so much in that camp that it's jumping to later in the movie, but I kind of don't love the scene when Arthur goes and meets Bruce. Like, he doesn't go there to see Bruce, but there is a scene of like, oh, look, it's Bruce Wayne. And that feels very much like, hey, for all of you audience people that can't handle Bruce not being in the movie, here he is. We're connecting it.
And it's
and I kind of don't really like it. Like, it's not really important. You could take that scene out and it wouldn't matter.
It wouldn't matter. It's a very uncomfortable scene to me. It's probably, I'm with you. I think it's the one scene I think they probably could have left on the cutting room floor, because it does feel like Warner Brothers probably told Todd Phillips, like, you have to have Bruce Wayne show up. Like, you just do.
Yeah, Thomas is not enough.
Right. Which is kind of a shame, because I feel like, and it's jumping way ahead, but I feel like the ending would have fit that rule of thumb perfectly and been just fine. But him like forcing Bruce to smile and shoving his thumbs in his mouth, every time I watch it, I'm like, this is gross. This is so wrong.
Yeah, I don't care for that. But and then the stuff that follows with the guy who I only associate in my mind as Alfred would be, he learns some interesting things that are valuable. But yeah, I totally agree. I think
excuse me, sorry.
So we haven't really talked about Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck and how phenomenally uncomfortable he makes you the entire movie.
Movie.
He is the perfect person for this movie and for this role, but it is definitely not the kind of thing that I would say I enjoy watching him exist. I don't really like watching him exist at all, which is a weird thing to say, because then at the end of the movie, I'm like, I loved that movie. And so it is a weird thing.
But that means he was doing his job right, because he had said in a handful of interviews, like, The most interesting thing about this character was that there was always something new to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And up until even, I guess, the last day that they were shooting, where they were still figuring out, like, oh God, he would probably be this way, or he would
Mm-hmm.
probably start going down this road. And he's such an unpredictable character. And yeah, Joaquin Phoenix is great in this role with this iteration of the Joker. Although I have heard, for a brilliant actor, he was a big pain in the ass on set.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't heard any of that.
I guess he was notorious for like just leaving the set and just kind of leaving everyone like, well, shit, our guy just walked out. But he always, I guess, came back.
Mm-hmm.
He was just having to take a moment to like kind of reset or get into a mental place where I don't know.
Yeah.
He's a method actor. Who knows
Yeah.
what goes on with these guys?
Which I completely get. Just seeing Arthur Fleck on screen, I'm like, he is so completely that person, and not just wardrobe, not just his facial interactions or his voice or anything, but his entire body and movement, and he is completely that person.
Yeah,
so
like,
I don't even know what it takes to get into that role.
it's crazy watching him in this. And I mean, we've been watching Joaquin Phoenix for, I think, damn near his whole career.
Yeah, since he was a kid in Parenthood, basically.
In Parenthood, yeah. And he's played a villain a handful of times, but I think this is his most intense role because you don't see him as Joaquin Phoenix. It's totally just like he sells it 100%. It's probably the massive weight loss, just the way he moves his body, how he responds, the voice, everything about it is just like, from the get-go, you're uncomfortable. I mean, the first scene in the whole movie is him just putting his makeup on and then forcing himself to smile with that single like tear.
Yeah.
And right out the gate, you're like, oof. Oof.
Yeah, this is not going to be fun.
Right. And it just increasingly gets his powerhouse in this film is just mind-boggling. Rewatching it again was like, good God. I can't imagine what it was like for like it's jumping way ahead, but the scene in his apartment right before he goes on the talk show, like the two other actors that are in that scene with him.
Yeah, the clowns.
I can't imagine the feeling of the room when they were filming that scene. Like, some of the urgency to get out of the room, I feel, might not have just been the acting. It may have been like, no, I gotta.
Yeah. Even when he drops the hostility and is nice to the
niceness is like,
you're like, you can't trust it. You're just so uneasy the entire time. Even after he's left, you're just waiting for him to bust back in.
Yeah, you're just like, this is so wrong. But that's jumping way ahead. No, Joaquin Phoenix, his performance is phenomenal. It makes sense why he was the winner of the Best Actor award. If I remember right, I think he even apologized to his castmates and the crew in his acceptance speech for being a pain in the ass. Which, good on you, man. Like,
yeah, that's the good time to do it for sure. You're like, it sucked while we were doing it, but look, it was worth it.
But look, we made something that's very memorable. It's crazy how it became that movie where you can just mention the title and you're going to get like an actual reaction. It's not just oh, I love that movie. It's you get something that's like internal from people to just like, ooh, yeah. It's like me when you bring up Prisoners, like it just instantly clicks with people.
It has a strong reaction for sure. Yeah, and he does such a good job of portraying so many different kinds of issues, not just mental health issues, but that's a big part of it. From his like actual physical health issues and the uncontrollable laughter, whether it's Tourette's tic or something like that, but also just his depression, his anxiety, his hopelessness, his being beaten down by the world, his desire to help his mom, but not really having any way to do that, and also just living in this city that is exceptionally shitty to him. There were so many times where I'm like, okay, we don't need to like chase him down the street and beat him up again. Like is that a thing that really happens in real life? Because I've never ever seen that happen, but it does happen to him a lot, and it does feel like he's targeted and picked out as like being bullied as an adult, which I don't know how many people get bullied, but I'm sure it does happen, and it probably does happen to people who are more vulnerable more often because of the bullies who are not actually that strong pick people who are weaker than them,
right.
To do it to, that they feel like they can get away with it, and they can definitely do that with him. He for a while, just for a little while, they can do it to him.
So rewatching it, I had a thought, and I hope people don't take it the wrong way, because I don't mean it to be in the way I'm scared people will take it. But anyways, rewatching it, he really does feel targeted.
Yeah.
A lot.
Right.
But at the same time, there's like this, I saw this clip, I forget it was some like life coach or some psychologist or something like that. Where the quote was, if you seek out like excuses or seek out, how'd she word it? It was like, if you seek out validation for you suffering or like, why is the world coming at me? If you seek out those answers, you'll find them.
Right.
So it's almost like Arthur Fleck, when we meet him, he's already like, my whole life is just the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of me was wondering, or just kind of thought like, maybe he is also personifying that idea of, if you go out looking for the worst, you're going to find the worst. If you go out for like, you tell yourself you suck or that you're the worst,
or that everybody hates you
and everyone hates you, everyone's against you, coming at you,
that's all you'll see.
Inadvertently put yourself in that situation, and you're going to have that validation. It's the worst kind of validation.
Yeah.
No, I don't want it to be taken as like victim blaming or anything. That's not what I mean. But
it's definitely true that your mental state, if you're in the worst situation, if you're poor and homeless and have nothing, the only thing you can control is your mental state. And if you still continue to think positively, more often than not, you will find a way out of that, as opposed to if you continue to think very negatively of yourself and your situation and blame everybody else for your problems, you're going to stay in those problems.
Right. And Arthur really does blame everyone else around him. Like the first time I saw it, it was kind of weird, because I think that first time you watch this movie, you're like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be like siding with him solely.
Yeah.
Like, should I be saying fuck the rich and like burn them all down? I don't know what's happening. How am I supposed to feel? Like, it throws you on this whirlwind. But watching it over and over again, you really kind of, or at least I really kind of zone in on like, he spends this whole movie kind of validating his negativity.
Yeah.
He wants people to like point out his flaws, because I mean, you find out later in his story, like, or they hint to like abuse in his childhood and stuff, so you're like, that's all he's ever known,
right?
And Joaquin Phoenix plays that mentality. Now, if that was Todd Phillips' intent, I don't know, but that's how I take it. And if that's how it was intended, then Joaquin Phoenix's performance is like so spot on. It's frightening. It's already spot on, but it is frightening watching him go through these motions, because you don't like sympathize with him. You kind of all of a sudden find yourself being like, oh shit, like, have I, not to those extremes, but have I put myself in that same principle? And sorry folks, I would be willing to bet that more times than not, we've all done it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely does that. I think it comes out the strongest at the end when he's invades the show and is not really being interviewed by Murray. Um, he asks a question like, do you think that men like Thomas Wayne ever think about people like me, and and to do they ever think about anybody but themselves? And then right after that he says, like, he starts talking about himself again, like all he's thinking about is also about himself. And it's ironic and kind of a conflict, but I think that's who he is. That's his character for sure. And when you think of, at least for me, when I think of all of the different times that he gets beat up or bullied or abused or whatever, I also try to keep in mind that he proves through the course of the movie to be an unreliable narrator of the story, that you see things happen that ended up having never happened. And so he can certainly, any other part of the movie then is arguably possible to have been either elevated or escalated or blown out of proportion, or maybe even never happened at all, and he just imagined it or maybe even wished it upon himself at some point. So that's certainly possible.
When they start throwing that aspect of the story in, it really makes you have to like, what has actually happened in this story then? Like, it gets wild, and I'm sure we're going to get into that stuff.
Yeah, but, for sure. The other part about him and his life and his poverty and his, I think, mental health issues, the story itself is largely about the effects of fatherlessness. In the very beginning, he is watching the Murray show with his mom and imagines himself in the audience and imagines that Murray has a conversation with him and then calls him down to the stage. And as soon as the lights go off or camera goes off, he tells him, I would give everything up. I would give all of my money and all of this show and all of my success up to just have a son like you. And that, I think, sets up the entire rest of the movie, not just because so much of life and individual issues and also just society in general has been linked to issues in society have been linked to fatherlessness, and whether it's fewer people graduate school or have successful jobs or are in poverty or in prison, if you don't have a father figure, whether it's a real father or not, chances are that you had a much harder time growing up and also finding success and having strong relationships. Men and women, doesn't matter. Fathers are very important, it seems like. So that, I think, as well as his pursuit of Thomas Wayne as potentially his actual father, father and sons is a big part of this story. And then his jealousy of Bruce, who is a legitimate son, and that feeding into kind of a new dynamic of the rivalry between Batman and Joker that hasn't really been part of the story before,
like, ever. But but they've always, I mean, Joker is the mirror of Batman, or Joker, not just that, but Joker is Batman if Batman allowed himself to cross lines.
Right.
That has always been a huge part of their story.
There's have more in common than they care to admit.
Yeah, or at least than
Batman Bruce cares to admit.
Yeah. Joker loves throwing it in his face. I think
so to make Joker then the bastard son and Bruce the legitimate son who also comes from a life of privilege, it just is another level.
It would be I'm kind of shocked that hasn't actually been done in the comics before, but I don't know how they would make it make sense without, I guess, tarnishing Thomas Wayne's like legacy.
Yeah,
because Thomas Wayne has always been built up to be a great man, especially to Bruce, a devoted man. But that's going down rabbit holes that don't even exist in this movie. Now, I love the theme, you brought it up, of fatherlessness.
Yeah.
I think it is important. And obviously, you and I are going to be a little biased in this camp because we're both dads. but it's true. There is something legitimate and statistical
Hmm.
with homes that have no father figure. It's detrimental to the child.
Hmm.
And him not having any father figure except for when you find out later on the one guy that showed up, but there was abuse associated with it, then it not only is neglect from a father figure, but now it's like the only
Yeah.
example is abuse. And
Right.
they never go into detail about it, which I'm thankful for. But it almost not having the detail just kind of exemplifies the possibilities of what the
Yeah.
abuse was.
Yeah. It takes something that was bad and makes it exponentially worse.
Yeah. So his he's a 30-something-year-old man who's taking care of his mom in the small. Actually, it's a pretty decent sized apartment. Honestly, he just
Hmm.
has a real tiny dining room table, but
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
but like his mom is also unstable throughout the course of the film, and it's
Yeah.
like he's having to take care of her, but he might actually kind of be, uh, I guess, keeping her in like kind of a unstable mentality because you kind of see him mixing pills at one point, and then he happens to
Yeah.
bring out the food right from the counter. You never see
Hmm.
her eat it, but it kind of, to me, it kind of hints to like, is he like making sure? What
Yeah.
is that condition called where? Uh,
Munchausen's by proxy.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's, I mean, there's not one thing in his life that you're like, he had a chance. Like he has always been in this kind of environment of just
Yeah.
hell. Uh,
Right.
and then when you see his journal, the journal pages are so random and so weird, but it makes so much sense for where he's at mentally.
Right.
I think they focus on that one line that he writes. The thing people, how does he word it? It's the one thing people don't tell you about mental illness is, or the funny
People
thing about mental illness is people expect you to act like you don't have it.
Yeah.
When they focus on that, that's kind of like, to me, that's kind of the like, he's made his first official jump into letting
Hmm.
Arthur Fleck go.
Hmm.
And he's just, God, this fucking movie, dude.
Yeah, that page and also the way he writes it, and as jaggedy and scratchy as it all looks, and then yeah, his all of his different pages are very messy and also very, they feel very personal but also very inappropriate,
Yeah.
in particularly when he goes and does stand up and he just has pasted in images of naked ladies on and is just flipping through, and you very obviously see it and you're like, who are you? Why are you such a weirdo in some ways? And so you definitely get why he's kind of on the edges of society, and society has rejected him and rejected supporting him and helping him in a lot of ways. But it also it doesn't answer the question. I think just the movie asks a lot of questions about what are his problems, what are learned, what are ingrained, what are oppressed on him by the father figures he's had,
Right.
people he's
Well,
interacted with, his own mom, and just society in general.
we're all products of our environment, right?
Hmm.
So if you're brought up in a loving environment, chances are you're going to be a very positive, loving person. You're brought up in this kind of environment that
Yeah,
he's lived in his whole life. Like, it's almost amazing that he's even made it to his 30s.
right.
Like,
Yeah, if you live in such a rundown, broken life, and it's no wonder that you have a rundown, broken mind.
right.
And yeah, a lot of people give up in that situation.
And you have that early scene where he's talking to his doctor. His demeanor in the doctor scenes is
Hmm.
always such a like, it's so unnerving to me. His body language is
Hmm.
very aggressive. It's
Yeah, he
very
feels
like
more in control
predatory.
of this. Yeah, in control of the session more than she does. It seems like she
Yeah.
seems very absent, like doesn't really care to be there.
And he's like studying her, and he calls her out on her shit, and his tone of voice is different. And it's
Hmm.
just every time that I've watched it, those doctor scenes, there's only a couple of them, but it's very
Hmm.
like oof, oof. And of course, those doctor scenes are like the basis of half of the theories about this movie that
Hmm.
that people have concocted, that Todd Phillips has never confirmed or denied. Same with
Hmm.
Joaquin Phoenix. They like leaving it to the audience. What you think is happening, we'll go with that. Um,
I haven't heard any of those, so you need
you
to
haven't
tell me
heard any of the
those.
theories? Well, you kind of already
No.
said one of them.
Okay.
Well, the main one that I've heard, which is what's in his head, what's not.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
I will say this, man.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm jumping the gun here. I feel like I'm jumping the gun. Oh well. Um, I forgot because it had been a minute since I've watched Joker. I
Hmm.
forgot just how uh, big of a piece of this movie music was. Like
Yeah.
everyone knows his dancing throughout the film,
Right.
but like I forgot. There's like, I mean, the way the music is used is it's almost like he's always dancing to the music that we the audience are hearing.
Hmm.
And there's even the scene in the subway, the first scene in the subway, the three Wall Street guys.
Yeah.
The one dude is like doing a song and number dance coming over
Uh-huh.
to Arthur, and it got me thinking
Yeah, and
where it
Arthur's
was
just
like,
laughing.
huh?
And Arthur's just laughing the whole
And he's just
time.
laughing, but it got me thinking because there's even a couple scenes where he's like singing that smile song that's
Yeah.
playing on the like on the actual film. But it got me thinking where it was like maybe the sequel being a musical makes more sense because music
Hmm.
is so like important to the way the story is being told. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm right with my theory that it's all in like the sequel, the song and dance is actually his head. But in this one, he does that a lot in this movie
Hmm.
where whether it's the night show when he's watching, he imagines that he's with Murray and Murray's telling him like, I would love to have a son like you. I'd give it all up. But he
Yeah.
also sings during some of those stressful moments where he imagines maybe the Wall Street guy wasn't singing and dancing to him, but he played it in his head that way because he's already fired. And who the fuck
Hmm.
brings a gun? Sorry to like completely stop that thought, but who the fuck brings a gun to a children's hospital?
The gun bits are honestly my favorite. You said this isn't a funny movie. I do laugh at two scenes. I laugh when he drops the gun at the children's
Yeah.
hospital because mostly the way he reacts is so perfect and it's so incredible and so inappropriate and so dangerous and all that stuff, but it is hilarious. And I also laugh so hard when he first gets the gun and he's just goofing off in his living room
Oh, and he shoots
and
the wall.
yeah, accidentally shoots the wall and then cranks up the TV and pretends like I'm watching a war movie, mom, and it's
Right.
like singing and dancing all happening. It's I laugh so hard at that. It's so funny,
That's
but very inappropriate.
yeah. Him bringing the gun to the children's hospital. That's one of those scenes that to me just like gives credibility to the thought of he kind of needs the world to be against him so he knows like
Hmm.
because he stomps his leg a handful of times before that gun drops, and it's almost like, I mean, on some level, did you do it on purpose? Like, are
Hmm.
you just doing this on purpose? And then he starts like self abusing, and yeah,
Yeah, it certainly could be a way to self sabotage to try
yeah,
to push the limits and feel like, oh, I want to do something else or feel like I have some sort of power, but not in any sort of healthy way whatsoever.
not even a little bit. But let's talk about one of the most uncomfortable. Well, when it really kicks in,
Hmm.
uncomfortable aspects of the film. And that's Zazie Beetz and her daughter,
Yes.
because they're so innocent.
Right.
And she plays this role so well, where she's just the neighbor in an elevator who's just like, I hate her situation, but it is what it is. She does the like,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Gun to the head.
But when he reenacts that in the hallway, it's
Yeah.
so like, oh, not a joke you're supposed to
Right.
reciprocate, man. Like,
Yeah, especially because she did it when her daughter wouldn't see it, and now you're doing it like, "Hey, look at me!"
right. And like he holds the pose, and it's
Mhm.
so uncomfortable.
I remember watching the movie the first time, and obviously it feels like there should be red flags, but I definitely bought it the whole time,
Okay.
and every time since, I'm like, of course she's not actually with you. You're the weirdest fucking guy who's a complete psychopath. Of course you made up the fact that you have this relationship with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then she'll just like showing up in the hospital when his mom is sick and all of that stuff. Like they use her so wisely, like popping in
Well, she
and
visits him at the comedy show that he mentioned. She's like, "Oh
yeah,
yeah, I think I could make it that."
visits him in the sense that
Sure.
you just see her shots of her in the audience smiling and you believe because he invited her in the elevator or told her about doing comedy in the elevator that she comes, but there's no like interaction really there. And then even in the hospital, I guess there's not really any interaction. She just kind of sitting next to him and she like touches him on the shoulder and he kind of acknowledges her that she's going to go get some water or
Yeah,
something.
she's like, "I'll get
And
coffee. You want one?" Yeah.
yeah, and then I guess the other scenes where he just like shows up at the door and knocks and they start making out, and I'm like, I should have seen it
Well,
so
yeah,
much
they do
earlier.
it so well because it's right after the subway scene. So he's feeling empowered. And if there's one thing that movies have always shown, is
Yeah.
like if there's a big passionate moment after a feeling of empowerment, like that's the start of a relationship.
Hmm.
And so
And yeah,
him,
would seize the day at that point for
yeah, so
sure.
him like making out with her, and then it made sense. You're like, oh yeah, they're totally a couple, and maybe she's gonna be his redeeming factor. Of
Hmm.
course, you find out like, oh god, he doesn't even have like the fantasy of having retaining
Yeah,
the redeeming factor when he's uh, when he is in her apartment, and her
yeah,
reaction of like, what are you doing in here? Like, your
yeah,
name's Arthur, right? You're down the hall. That first time watching, I was just like, oh, I feel sick.
yeah.
Like, oh my god, he's got to get the
Right,
fuck out of this. Like,
right. Yeah, it's very scary for her and for her daughter, of course.
yeah. And then him doing the gun thing again. It's like, oh, this is so fucking.
Yeah.
But we've mentioned it a couple times.
Hmm.
The subway scene
Hmm.
with the Wall Street guys. It's pretty set up as a basic scene we've seen in movies before, where they're teasing like an unassuming woman or a nerd
Yeah,
or someone on the subway.
yeah. Bunch of
Bullying them.
dicks,
Yeah,
toxic masculinity, all that stuff you would see.
being assholes.
Yeah.
Uh, the way that like he tries to do what he normally does, I have a card, I have a condition,
Hmm.
and then they just abuse him right off the bat. But what takes me off guard is when they hit him, the way his body just like plank falls.
Hmm.
I'm like, that's painful. Like, you don't even try
Hmm.
to brace yourself. You just kind of take it.
Yeah.
Ugh. Ugh. The accelerated violence. I think that's one
Hmm.
of the most standout aspects of the film, because there's actually not a lot of hyper violence, but the moment
Yeah.
it's like Tarantino style, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like it's not
Or
a two
Scorsese.
or
Yeah.
Scorsese. Yeah, you're not gonna have like the 2 hours that's just action, 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 violence, violence, violence. You're gonna have your spurts, but the spurts are more intense and more like unnerving because it's so
Mm-hmm.
quick and it's so visceral and real, and you're like, ugh. But him, like,
Yeah.
the gunshot still takes me off guard every time because you always forget when it actually happens
Yeah.
because it happens so
Yeah. And you
fast.
don't really see him like pull it out. Like he
No.
doesn't really threaten. He just like it's a split decision that he's just gonna pull it out and blast this dude. And then at that point he's just kind of too far down the path that he's I've already shot these guys and that guy's running away and he's bleeding and I have to go shoot him
I
now, I
have to
guess.
finish what I started, right? Him executing that dude on the steps is still one of
Mhm.
the like that with the music that's playing, that like the music in this movie,
Yeah.
that deep and dark overtones, and you're just like, man, this is like the drama comic book version of like the Halloween theme song, right? Where you hear it and you're just
Mhm.
like, well, so this is what Doom sounds like. This is
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
him.
it perfectly matches the movie.
It does. And then the famous bathroom dancing. See, everyone talks about the stairs. And yeah, him dancing on the stairs is iconic and a lot
Mhm.
of, very interesting to watch because it's a whole new version of him. But the bathroom dance to me is the one that's like, that's where Joker is actually
Mhm.
starting to come forth. Like that,
Yeah.
the product of his environment is officially coming out. I mean, you look at real life serial killers throughout history,
Mhm.
all of them were raised in abusive homes. All of them are raised, there's neglect, there's just violence throughout. So you're like, we're seeing it come through.
Yeah.
This is where he's
Yeah,
at.
and to do such a violent and heinous act and not hate it, not hate the fact that she
Yeah,
did that, and kind of celebrate it by dancing in the bathroom and making up a little jig, it definitely doesn't bode well for where he's going to go from there.
right. Like, all right, no redeeming moment for this guy. Like, there's no
Yeah,
coming back now. There's no apology you're gonna make that's gonna make the audience be like, it's okay, Arthur. We
right.
get it.
And that's actually one of the complaints I've heard about this movie and a bunch of other movies, but this movie kind of falls into the category, is that it does kind of seem, or at least to some people, it can seem like there have been more movies about like a weak character or I don't know if you've heard the phrase incel, involuntary celibate. They're like nerds that just are frustrated that they can't get women or whatever, or just are down on themselves or down on their luck and all of that stuff. And there have been more and more movies that have just kind of like a weak protagonist that is then could be considered heralded as a hero through the story or by some people in the story that people can latch on to. Other people that feel this way can be like, oh, he did it, I can do it too, that kind of thing. But I don't take that from this movie at all because he's a villain. Like everybody knows, Joker is a villain, and has no redeeming qualities, and he's just the worst person ever, and is always going to do things that are vile and hurtful and ruin people's lives, and
Well,
is just not to be looked up to in any way, shape, or form.
yeah, but there's some people in our world that need a lot of help. I mean, everyone needs help, but like,
Yeah.
I think it really started shining through that, I don't know, modern times, I guess a lot of people have romanticized the wrong things. And what's funny to me
Mm-hmm.
about it, well, maybe funny, saying that funny is the wrong way. It's interesting to me that the Joker has kind of been the guy that's been at the forefront of this like romanticization.
Cessation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
started
you
with
see that all the time with like Jared Leto Jokers on
right, and it
people's like
started with
Facebook
him and Harley
profiles. And,
Quinn. Like everyone
yeah.
was like, suddenly there was like relationship goals to be Joker and Harley,
It's like the most toxic
and it's
relationship
like,
ever.
there's not a single ounce of actual love between those two. Like, if you've
Yeah.
ever read the material or talked to any comic book nerd, they would tell
Mhm.
you, no, they are as toxic as you can possibly get. They're abusive, they're mass
Mhm.
murderers, they are narcissists. Like, they are the worst
Mhm.
examples.
And they don't even treat each other well.
No, they're horrible. They like they actually try to kill each other, actively try to murder each other.
Mhm.
They're terrible, terrible, terrible. But people
Mhm.
were romanticizing them, and like, this is what we want to be like.
Yeah.
And so I could kind of see with this one, people saying like, well, we're supposed to take a or view Arthur Fleck as like heroic almost for his stance against society, and they're romanticizing the character again. And it's like, people,
Mhm.
like, you need to reevaluate a few things. Now, it's one thing to like latch on to fictional characters for inspiration. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
But you need to latch on to the ones that are edifying. And the
Yeah.
Joker has never been edifying. And Arthur Fleck is no exception to that role. I mean, he
Mhm.
leans into the violence, he leans into chaos and making the horrible, heinous decisions. Like, he embraces it, he thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I
not
think
the kind of guy you want to be leading your charge. Okay.
yeah, I think that that's all true, and I think that focusing on a hero who has good principles and good,
Mhm.
qualities is very, very important. But also, I guess, kind of get the complaint that I brought up in the sense that we don't have these days. Every hero has to have like an explanation or some grounded dark side that they need explained about them, or or they're struggling with some bad quality. There's not like the pure archetypal mythology hero that we've had in the past anymore. Everything has to be like deconstructed and
Yeah.
super gritty and all that stuff. So I get that for sure. I think that when you go into this movie and watch it, it's hard to avoid, at least especially when it came out in 2019, it was hard to avoid the politics of it as well,
Yeah.
because it was a couple of years into Trump's presidency, and the movie, Todd Phillips has said, and he co-wrote it and directed it, he said it is not a political film at all.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with him. I do think that it's not a political film, but it is a movie about people and groups of people, and how in those situations, when all hope is lost and when trash is piling up and all these things, will look to someone, and they oftentimes do not hesitate to look towards a terrible leader, whether it's a politician or an oligarch or whatever. And so those kinds of broken people, human beings, can rise to power in those situations, and that's something to be concerned about. But you see at times like, and I was worried as a viewer watching it the first time that they were trying to turn Thomas Wayne into that, because there is a commentary on people blaming the rich for their
Yeah.
problems, and Thomas Wayne is a very rich private businessman, and trying to enter politics to become the mayor, or running for mayor of Gotham. And so that, and you see signs, people calling him a fascist for some reason, and the Joker mob that takes on his mantle does kind of behave like we saw Antifa and all of these other groups behave back then. So there was a lot of, I guess, parallels, maybe intentional or not, just sometimes society mirrors art in some weird ways. But I was glad that the movie didn't go there, and that even through the course of it, and even through the course of Thomas Wayne being called a fascist, or even getting into politics in general, which I'm not a fan of him doing. I liked the private entrepreneur and philanthropist version of him better. it still worked for me, and it didn't sully him, and it didn't take it down the path of like, oh, he was a bad guy, and he also definitely had this relationship with his Arthur Fleck's mother, and then abandoned her son and treated him like this. And it doesn't answer any of those questions in a way that it's like makes it a bad thing. Really, it can serve the story and serve the world and serve the characters, and not make it about like, oh, we're fighting Trump by making this movie, which some movies have tried to do, and it definitely takes you out of the story when they do that.
Yeah, I was watching it that first time when the riots and the protests were being shown. Yeah, I kind of had that little aversion of like, oh, let's like sometimes it's smarter to leave the politics out of the story. I like you, I have never taken it as an actual political film. I'm glad to hear that Todd Phillips has also said like it's not political at all. It's we're looking at this character. That's what we're looking at. But I could see how people would take it as being a political film, especially after the 1% protests came out. I think that was around the same time too, maybe a year or so before.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, our world has always been like this, but I am glad that they don't actually tarnish the character of Thomas Wayne or take it down a political road. They try, but then you learn like the truth of like, oh, this narrative just is delusion, which to me also kind of just throws like more fuel on the fire of like, if there's ever a statement that's beyond the mental health stuff that Joker shows and highlights and talks about, it would also be like narratives. Like, be careful. You said it earlier, Arthur Fleck is not a trusting, you can't trust what he's seen or what he says.
Yeah.
That works a lot of the time in forms of media. It works all the time. And
right.
You know, depending on the kind of person you're talking to or whatever, are they going to be kind of open to understanding where you're coming from, or are you shut off right away? Like, there's a lot of different stuff. Their narrative is so important, and how it's
and everybody latches on to what they identify with the most. And so if two people can hear the same story or hear the same news thing and take different important things out of it, and then that just kind of spreads and that goes even further up the chain, that the actual people looking at for news and reporting news are finding different things that they feel are important to highlight. And then that is all that anybody hears, right? Because that's all that they really highlighted. And it happens in science. It happens in every aspect.
It happens in every
It's a human thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a problem.
It's kind of a big problem.
We haven't figured it out yet. Maybe someday we will. But I like that movies like this show that there's not a clear answer, because it's a very complicated problem. Humanity is such a large group, and we together are a very large organism, that there's no clear answer to solve this. And it often comes down to the individual. That you can't fix it at a societal level. You can't vote your way out of it. You can't do any of these things. It really just comes down to, what are you doing in your life to make your life better, and to control your own narratives in your mind of what you're telling yourself and what you're doing and what is actually true and what you want to achieve, and all that good stuff.
You know, you can't be useful to the world around you or have an impact on the world around you until you kind of take care of your own shit, right? So yeah, it's exactly what you just said. Like, we can't fix all these issues by voting a different politician. Hate to break it to you people, they're all the same. Like,
Yep. We only ended up with worse and worse things. It's never really gotten better.
Has it really changed for the better for you? No, it hasn't. Don't lie to yourself. But it is your responsibility to make sure you're holding yourself accountable for a lot of stuff, and then that can help trickle stuff, and then that's how you actually correct stuff. But it starts with you, and unfortunately,
making healthy choices every day, not bringing guns to children's hospitals and dropping them on the floor.
That's usually a good start right there.
Yeah, start with the little things like that.
Yeah, it's just I think people don't like holding themselves accountable, and this movie shows a lot of that, of just put the blame on, well, it's their fault.
Right.
And it's like, well, okay, but that's like the big broad stroke, right? You got to get into the nitty gritty. And that's where you're going to be uncomfortable, folks. That's hard lessons.
Yeah.
Hard lessons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And learning why you're actually at the place that you are and what you can do to get out of it, as far as, and that's something that Arthur never really does. He never really examines where he's at and what he can do to make his life better. And he just continues down the road of darkness and self-pity and self-sabotage until he gets to the bottom of it, really.
Which to him, that's his rise. But it's like, man, what kind of cost is that? Like,
yeah, it's giving up on some level.
Yeah. But yeah, Arthur Fleck, he's such a great example of so many bad choices. the self-sabotage, the narcissism, the blame lack of accountability, and then straight up just, I mean, he's a murderer. And he's like proud of it to the point where he finds it funny, which is an actual trait of comic book Joker. He thinks mass murder's hilarious because life is a comedy, which I always appreciate. They have him say that line in this movie. Always. Like, I can watch it and not connect it to a comic book movie, but every time he says, like, my life isn't a drama, it's a comedy, it's like, that's comic book pages right there. Get on me, guys.
Yeah, I love that a lot, and I love. We talked a little bit about the style, but I love the connections or the leaning into Joker as a clown in ways that we have never really seen them do before. It was
like
always
an actual clown.
Yeah, it's always been like, oh, it's a weird gimmick that he has, and he's got some get up, and it separates him from everybody else because nobody else does that. But this, I think, makes connections not just to Scorsese and actual comics, like stand-up comics, but to like Pagliacci and like operas and like tragic clown figures and the tragedy of wearing face paint that is very happy and smiling when you don't feel like happy and smiling inside. And just very blatantly illustrating through face paint what normal people do all the time, where you pretend you're okay when you're not really, and you wear a smile on your face when you don't feel like it. The clown, and particularly Arthur, takes it kind of to the extreme. And I really enjoy the other clowns that he works with and their kind of outlook on life as you should have the happiest, funnest job. You're making kids smile. And they're just the most disgruntled, disheveled, gross people.
They're just like, I hate. I mean, they're carrying guns because they might get jumped on the street. Like, it's kind of a weird thing that the clown persona is constantly like represented with, well, the person is actually miserable or evil, or the smile is completely false, when clowns were supposed to be like a symbol of laughter and joy and lightheartedness and happiness. It's I mean, maybe back in the day, Jester times, because I think that's when like the clown stuff was technically starting, was in the
Yeah.
Jester days. But maybe when like in storytelling, when clowns started being images of negativity or evil, maybe people had the same aversion like I did when they made the Winnie the Pooh thing, where they're like, you took something so good and you just ruined it, but now it's like a normal piece of our society.
Yeah. Now clowns are more commonly scary than actually
Right.
fun.
And I'm like, I prefer the freakier clown over the happy clown. Like,
you prefer killer clowns from outer space.
I do.
I know. We all know how much
They're
you
like
love
the best kinds of clowns.
that. Did you see there's a Killer Clowns from Outer Space video game?
Yeah, I would be lying to you if I told you I was not considering getting a console just for the game. But I'm like,
Yeah.
am I really
like where it's played, but I was like, Dustin should get this.
Yeah, I think actually one of our listeners sent me the like trailer for it, or sent us the trailer for it. Yeah, it's like, oh man, you know me. Oh man.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, let's get back away from Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
I guess, yeah.
Yes, the idea of leaning into Arthur being a legitimate clown, very cool. It's never been something that I've ever needed an explanation for the character. Yeah. I've just always accepted like the theatricality of the character. But I like that Arthur would just, since I'm already a clown, I'm just gonna stick with the clown. And then he's like with the suit and stuff, it's almost like he takes on the jester persona mixed with like the actual clown. Of course, he's a murderer at that point and like proud of it. But you got me on clowns, and I started thinking like, oh, I like evil clowns. So the killer clowns, I love Pennywise. I love art. Like, I'm a big fan of the Joker as a character. Like,
I know it expands rapidly throughout culture, and it's a big part of seeing Joker. I mean, seeing Joker outside of the clown costume is also new and interesting and different. I think
unnerving. It's like watching Christian Bale in The Machinist, where you're like, your rib cage looks like it's protruding out of your body.
Yeah, that's like the weirdest part, is that he not only moves in strange ways, but he moves in ways that makes his body look like it's different than I've ever seen a body before, or that there's something wrong with it or something. Yeah, the way he sits on the couch and his ribs are sticking out, just the way he dances and moves and uses his arms is in a very strange way. And I know it's meant to make you uncomfortable, and it definitely makes me uncomfortable.
It achieves that effect.
Okay.
The scene with his mom in the hospital after ZZ Beats is like not in the picture anymore. But when he's confronting his mom about the info that he learned, I don't know if it's just because like we know as the audience we're watching this guy just choose to be a killer and completely disassociate and disconnect from the world, or if it's just Joaquin Phoenix being this good of an actor, or if it was done in post. I don't know, but you can see in his eyes, like he does, like you just understand just from watching his face of like, oh, he is gone. Like there is nothing there anymore. He kills his mom. Like he's been taking care of her, and he just like suffocates her and has no real emotion about it. He just like pulls the pillow up and just like, and that's when he has the line, "My life isn't a drama, it's a comedy." But that scene is very unnerving to me. And we've seen plenty of movies where someone is killed in that style.
Yeah.
But there's something so helpless and just so like gross about this scene. At least to me, it takes me like, ooh, this one is a bit much. I don't know if it's just because he's killing his mom that does it to me, but I swear to God, like there's a shift in his face from that moment to the end of the film that's like he is gone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it builds well because there is a lot of hope in his mind when he first sees the letter that Penny writes to Thomas and says, "Oh, you need to take care of your son. He's a good boy. He's got some problems and all this stuff." And he kind of learns the possibility that Thomas could be his father and he could have that father figure. And then to go to Arkham and get the file and then learn that she was locked up for being a narcissist and imagining the scenarios, and it's done in a way that you could say, oh, well, Thomas Wayne is powerful enough. He could have sent her there to get rid of a problem and used his power to influence the doctors or the reason for her being admitted and all of that stuff, getting locked up just to get her out of the picture. But I really believe that she clearly has a lot of mental issues. I don't doubt that she would imagine these scenarios as a coping mechanism or whatever it ends up being to get through life and to feel that way, and then to tell him that lie over and over that Thomas Wayne's a great man. He'll take care of his people. We're like his family because I worked for him and all this stuff. And then find out that she feels like she probably completely believes it. Even she could be that delusional that she believes that Arthur is his family and should be taken care of. And so for him to learn that that's not true is that breaking point that he really then has nothing else to hope for anymore. That was kind of the thing he was holding on to, and it gets taken away. And so he's like, I can't keep doing this. And kills his mother, which she's not like a great loving character that you care a lot about, but you definitely feel bad that he's murdering her also.
Well, it's
complicated feelings.
I mean, she's like in the hospital bed. She had just had a stroke, so she's completely helpless in the moment.
Yeah.
And he just kills her. He just like...
Yeah. I mean, you do learn, I think, in that file that she is locked up in Arkham for allowing the abuse of him from her boyfriend.
Yeah. It's like child neglect and abuse. And
it's easy, I think, for Arthur then to blame her for some of the things that made him who he is today. And she is worthy of that blame, I think. That whether she could have avoided it or not, to some degree, I think that she certainly could have avoided it, and her parenting choices are worth him taking issue with, worth killing her over. I'm not necessarily, but definitely worth him getting upset about.
Right. Yeah, that file. So one of my favorite little details about that file, and it does go back to like one of the greatest aspects about the character of the Joker from the very start of his character to now, his character's whole existence. One of the things that has always lent him so much credibility or fear is he has no name. No one knows his name. I know the Killing Joke, some people will be like, well, then the Killing Joke, well, that was never canonized.
Yeah, it's just a standalone novel.
It's a standalone novel. And then DC thought, well, we can keep Barbara becoming the Oracle and having been shot. We can keep that. But the rest, no. And so I like that in that file, as Arthur's reading it, you find out that Arthur's not even his actual name. That's just the name that Penny gave him. He's never had a name. So I love that detail, because he chooses like, well, then Joker is my name. It's like that's
Mhm.
a good moment, and it also kind of helps lend more into like one of the aspects in our world that I think gets ignored a lot is the importance of identity.
Yeah.
He has no actual identity. You know,
Mhm.
his one dream to be a stand-up comedian, but his mom's response to it is like, but you're not funny. You're not
Mhm.
like you just need to work. And it's like Arthur has no identity until he starts noticing that he's kind of become that symbol for Gotham when he sees the clown masks around.
Mhm.
I love that aspect of like, nope, he has no name. Arthur Fleck
Yeah.
is not.
Yeah. I love that too. And I agree with you completely. I think not being able to be a clown, feeling like you're a clown, that's your job, and then you get fired. Nobody wants you as a clown. Nobody wants you as a comic. Nobody wants you as really a son. And then to see, oh well, here's this whole huge group who are saying this guy, whoever he is out there,
Right.
he did a good thing. He is a hero, and he definitely is improving the city for us, and we need to find him. And so to see that, I completely understand why he would say that that's me. I did that. I'm a
Yep.
hero. I should be that guy, and just turn it up to 11 then, because
Right.
that's the solution to this.
Yeah, because he turns it up when he starts dyeing his hair green. I know that was part of the trailers, but watching it in the movie, it gives it so much weight. Because
Hmm.
as a fan of like the comics and the character in general, you understand like the transformation is
Hmm.
like his mental state's already there, but now it's the physical transformation into the character we
Yeah,
know,
and it's necessary
and
to
it's
like fully become that persona,
yeah. Uh,
so you just know where it's leading.
you know it's not going anywhere good. I think they do an interesting thing in it where they make you. I at least definitely believed like, oh my god, he's actually going to go on this talk show that just mocked him, and
Hmm.
he's going to kill himself. Like he practices it in the living room. He's like geared up for it. He's all suited up nice. It's like I've made my mark.
Yeah.
People will know my name. Like they're never going to forget his name after the talk show.
Yeah.
I totally thought like just with the vibe of the whole movie, I was like, it would fit for
Hmm.
Arthur to kill himself on air
Yeah.
trying to tell a joke. Like that fits the narrative of the film. I
Yeah.
totally bought that's where they were gonna go. I totally thought
Hmm.
it was.
Yeah, I could see that as well as like it's trying to get a reaction from the crowd when he can't get any other reaction out of them because he can't. Comedy is such a great thing because you are manipulating the audience to involuntarily laugh just by saying some words and doing things in certain timings, basically.
Mhm.
And so you do have some sort of power over them. But when you can't do that, and when you're on stage and everybody's laughing at you for the wrong reasons, I feel I feel for him how he feels in those moments when he just is bombing so hard
Oh
that
yeah.
that he definitely, I don't know, I get that for him, and I kind of want him to succeed. I'm like, you have a couple good jokes, like you could polish this if you really tried, but you're not trying at all, really.
Yeah, the I guess the one thing that I like actually sympathize is that one scene where he goes on stage to try and do stand up comedy, and it's his condition like
Hmm.
interferes and completely ruins his chance
Hmm.
right out the gate, and then he just is him, and he takes it. He's just awkward about it. He has no
Hmm.
delivery time, and yeah, you're like, oh, these assholes need to like give you something. But I will tell you, man, I've been in audiences before where at a stand-up show where it's just like, this is not funny. You can't even pity laugh because it's so bad. You just sit there like, good God, how much longer is their set?
Yeah. It's also not for everyone. Like,
it's not.
The best comedians are like some of the smartest people, and they can tell you exactly why this is funny and this isn't funny. And if you change this phrasing or you did this a half a second later, it would just not work. They get all of those little things. Arthur doesn't get any of that. Like the scene when he like is watching another comic and he's taking notes and stuff, the audience laughs. And then when it's completely silent or when it's the setup for the next joke, he starts laughing.
Yeah.
And he's just completely out of sync or autistic in some way, or it just can't connect why this works, why this doesn't work, when I should laugh, when I shouldn't laugh. He's not on the same wavelength of the rest of society in any way.
No, and he's like trying to study the audience in comparison to the comic.
Yeah. And he seems kind of surprised. He's like, why are you laughing at that and not the other thing?
And it's him watching that other comic and taking his notes and stuff. Like, as a comic, I would imagine at least modern comics would hear that first like mistimed laugh and called it out instantly to be like, okay, so we're gonna meet this guy.
Yeah.
Thank God for the 70s where they didn't call out audience members, I guess.
Well, they did. They just didn't put it on TikTok.
They just didn't put it on TikTok. Yeah. They didn't make reels for Facebook and Instagram.
Right. But when he does bomb and then that clip gets shown on Murray's show and kind of goes mainstream, goes wide, that leads to the end, leads to him being invited on the show and all of that stuff. I think that he has mixed feelings about it because on some level, hey, look, I'm on TV and that is some amount of notoriety and it's exciting. But then to hear everybody making fun of you, I do think he gets that. I think that he gets, Murray's not being nice to me and he's not like how I imagined he would be. He's not in love with me as a son just by seeing my set and then Murray kind of gets everybody else to laugh at him for the wrong reasons by making jokes about him or at his expense, basically.
Yeah, Murray, I mean, Robert De Niro, he does a really good job as Murray. And he's able to deliver the jokes well, but De Niro is great at like shifting tone. So he goes from making the jokes, making the little wisecracks, and then when Arthur like goes full Joker, when his honesty comes out, the shift in the tone, I think De Niro does such a great job leading that shift because he's kind of setting, Joaquin Phoenix's performance up for it, and then he has to like,
he's kind of as the interviewer asking him questions like, what do you mean by that? Do you mean that you're taking this seriously or what? Yeah, he does that for sure.
I always forget that Mark Maron is in the movie. I always forget that he's in it
as the like stagehand or talent manager or whatever he is.
And I've never been the biggest fan of his. I feel like he's a little extremist in the majority of his opinions and viewpoints, and it's kind of I always disconnect from him. But every time he pops up, I'm always like, oh, Mark Maron. You don't even wear like different makeup. You're literally wearing the same beard, same haircut. Like, I don't know. It's such a minuscule thing, but every time he pops up and he bitches about Joker wanting to be called Joker, it's like, shut up, Mark.
Yeah, I get that too. There's a handful. I think there's a couple of stand-up comedians that have cameos in the movie.
Yeah. Well, the comedian at the club, that's a real stand-up comic. I forget his name, though.
One of the other clowns is I forget who he is. He's on like he's a friend of Joe Rogan's. He's on his podcast a lot. Um, he's on the Fighter and the Kid podcast with the other guy who's from the USC, but it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? But it's a kind of a interesting movie about stand-ups as well, in a way, about them going on stage and kind of what it takes to be a comedian, and then also bombing and trying to write jokes. I mean, you talked about his notebook before and the joke in it. He, like I said, he has a couple of good jokes. I don't think that the people expect you to not have mental health thing is really a joke, but when he says that, what's the line where he's like, I told my mom I was going to be a stand-up comedian, and
she said, "You're gonna have to work for a living." He said, "No, I'm gonna be a comedian."
Yeah, and look, nobody's laughing now or whatever.
Yeah,
that's a funny joke because nobody is laughing at the same time.
That's the kind of joke where you're like, if this wasn't a real stand-up special, it would be funny, but it's so sad when he says, "Well, look who's laughing now," and it's like dead air. Of course, Murray like cuts the feed right away and like mocks him, but
yeah, I could see. I think they call it anti-comics, like kind of do that where you are purposefully unfunny, or you get a kick out of people not laughing and spoiling your own punchlines and things like that. Joker's kind of an anti-comedian in a way.
Joker's kind of anti a lot of things.
Well, that's true. That's definitely true.
But yeah, him being on the talk show, him dancing behind the curtain. I love it. I think that's my favorite dance sequence in the film. It's the shortest one that he does, but I think it's my favorite. There's just something about the silhouette with him smoking as the curtains like open up where you can tell his nerves are calm and he's actually like pulling off. Of course, Murray kind of
grooving to his own beat at that point.
Murray kind of triggers those nerves again, but with mocking him. And again, you can just see it in his eyes. Like Joaquin Phoenix, his performance is incredible. It really, really is, because he does that so well where you can see in his eyes the moment Murray starts like mocking him, you can just see his eyes shift into like just hate and just like, I guess, despair, and just it's so God. Joaquin Phoenix is so good. He really is.
Yeah, I think you can see his plan change, because I think that up until the point that he's on the couch, he intended to kill himself on the show, and then being in that position and hearing everybody around him and feeling separated from them, that you're all different from me, or I'm different from you, and you're treating me that way, and you're wrong for that. I'm right for that, making me the hero of this story. I think at that point he basically decides, fuck you guys, and chooses to go off the deep end there.
It's one of the most like shocking kill scenes since like The Departed, or at least abrupt, maybe shocking's not, but abrupt kill scenes. When he shoots Murray in the face, it's like, holy shit, like you just shot Robert De Niro in the face. Not only that, but it's like when you see that wide shot, he's like shot above his eyebrow on the left side, so it's not even like a clean shot, which is great. I'm so glad it's not like a super clean shot, but his whole demeanor, I love how he just stays sitting. He gets up, he like drops the gun, kind of does his like, shit, what do I do now? And the only thing he can think of is going up to the camera and saying, remember, that's life. Of course, they cut him off before he could say it.
Uh-huh.
But Murray's murder scene is like, it's another one of those. Every time I watch it, it's just like, oof.
Yeah.
You feel that one. Like that
Yeah.
one settles.
And I think it settles so much because the tension leading up to it is so strict.
Oh,
Like it
yeah.
is so tense in that scene because even if you believe completely that he's going to kill himself and follow through with it, he's so unstable and at any moment it could happen, and they tease you with him reaching for his joke book and pulling it out, and you're like, oh, he's not going to pull out a book, he's going to pull out a gun, and then he pulls out his joke book, and so you just go back and forth of what's going to happen next, and you're on the edge of your seat the entire time. It's so well done.
Yeah, it is tension at its finest, because I mean, again, with the music that's playing over it and then the silence of it, because they dropped the music for a little bit during it.
Mm-hmm.
His demeanor on the chair, De Niro's whole demeanor of like, we're staying on the air, I have to like, he kind of goes into that mode of like, I have to keep this guy talking and whatever, but he's got to call him out on his shit. You've got the stagehand that's like, we got to cut, like, this is so wrong. Like,
yeah
everything about it. Oh, yeah, him taking Murray out is still.
And like the other guests on the other guests on the couch next to him are just
I know, like
hostages in the situation.
Yeah, I also love, like, so they cut it. You have the happy, like, off-air music that plays, but the zoom out with all the different screens and the news outlets reporting it and replaying the broadcast of it over and over and over again, that sits with me, and it always reminds me of like the days after 9/11.
Yeah,
where all you saw was just, well, we're going to keep replaying the attack over and over every day. I mean, we watched, you couldn't turn anything on without the footage over and over again. It gets to a point where you're like, we know.
Yeah.
Like,
you just need to say the words and everybody remembers.
We know what happened. You don't have to repeatedly. But to me, that's like, if there's any kind of political jab or whatever, or maybe political is the wrong word, but any jab that's
societal,
yeah, it's the sensationalizing tragedy.
Yeah.
And I love that zoom out, because to me it's very much like sensationalizing. They're giving Arthur Fleck this boost. You know, it's like repeating names of murderers and thinking that, you know, it's cool. They're just going to sit.
Right.
That's what it reminds me of.
And giving them so much notoriety in the news. And then, I mean, that happens with mass murderers nowadays, where then new murderers will idolize them and want the notoriety and fame that they achieved when they did it. So they want to, it's an outlet that they can take to do the same thing, achieve the same thing, which just, it escalates things. And also it also, I think, desensitizes us to it as well. Like, if you see it the first time, you're like, oh my God, it's a terrible thing that I can't believe happened. But you see it over and over and you're like, okay, I get it. Like, well, I've seen it a million times. It's not that crazy anymore, when it should be terrifying and heinous.
It should be horrible.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's
the media is such an interesting thing, and not in the best way, but that's a tangent for another time. I think especially Batman fans, or Dark Knight fans, I should say, but I feel like moviegoers in general should have been fan at the nod to Heath Ledger's Joker, with him in the cop car just sitting. I mean, his head's not out the window, but it's such an obvious, like, this is very similar to Heath Ledger in the cop car in The Dark Knight. Like, he's smiling at the chaos and carnage that's going on around outside of
Mhm.
and it's all due to him. Like, he's proud of this work.
Yeah, taking joy in it.
I'm like, yeah, that's a good nod. Good job, Todd Phillips. That's a good nod. Like,
Yeah, not direct, but very, very good.
yeah,
Yeah, and so him becoming Joker and getting arrested, being in the cop car, and then escaping the cop car, kind of when he's in the cop car, he sees what his actions have basically triggered in the rest of society. That there's riots, there's things on fire, there's smoke and debris, and the whole city fell apart while he was in that interview, basically. And it's such a abrupt, I guess, rise to the front the
right.
front line or the spotlight or whatever you want to call it, that's all it took. That it's kind of put it in American history terms, just like the shot that was heard around the world when he shot Murray, and everybody's like, okay, this is the only excuse we need. It's all going to kick off now. And then he basically becomes the Joker and has all of these minions running around.
Right.
His little band of merry men who are...
Well, when they crash into the cop car, and the two goons come over and see that it's him, they have that reaction of like, it's the guy. Like, they don't say it, but you know that's what they're implying. And them like idolizing him by laying him down on top of it and telling him to get up, and him like embracing it, and the blood smile that he does. It's one of those things that brings back what I said earlier about just the romanticizing and the fantasy and like idolizing all the wrong things.
Right.
Like, what a terrifying road to go down. And it's like, as a comic book fan, seeing Gotham idolize this guy, and then you're like, well, in my head, I know the road that Gotham is put on. I know that eventually the majority of citizens shift. You're always going to have goons, but they find Batman. Well, Batman kind of makes them find him. He shows up.
Yeah, Batman decides to save the city whether they want to be saved or
not, and then they just kind of like, you're for the right now, folks. But it's like, it's one of those things about this movie that just sits with me all the time. Of like, it's such a great cautionary tale. It's overwhelming because there's so many things in it, but I like that about it, because it's like, here's a 2-hour film that is basically every red flag you can think of.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, for sure. And I said before, I didn't like the scene where Joker goes and meets Bruce, but I do like the scene where the Waynes walk out of the theater, seeing Zorro. Like, to connect it to Batman in that way, to connect it to the most foundational part of who he is as a character, being something that was created by Joker, by this character. He caused this riot, which caused the Waynes to leave the theater, which caused this random person to gun them down. It's not Joaquin's Joker gunning him down, which I think is a wise choice, that it's a faceless, nameless goon. Could be Joe Chill, could be whoever, shooting them and essentially creating that, tying it in that way. I think is very, very smart.
Yeah, and that was what I alluded to earlier with having Bruce Wayne appear in the film. They could have done without the scene with Arthur meeting Bruce and just left that scene of the murder of the Waynes and Bruce standing there, because Arthur is even laughing. I love that, with that ending where he's talking to his other doctor, his new doctor, and he's laughing again. And it sounds like a interesting mix of the painful laugh from the condition and just kind of like a I guess the kind of laugh that we have when you realize, like, well, shit. Like, all I have
Yeah.
left is I'm going to be able to laugh. It's almost like he understands his actions of chaos and violence have led to such a greater picture of chaos and violence, but there's also my actions may have just caused someone to come and fight against this. Like someone might be averse to what's happening and try to change it. That's how I take that scene of him laughing, because you have that shot of Bruce standing over Thomas and Martha, and he's laughing, and doctor says, you know, what's so funny? Well, I thought of a joke. You wouldn't get it. I love that, because to me it's like he's understanding the effects from my actions or the reaction to what I've done. It might bite me in the ass. Like this could take a different turn.
Yeah.
It's like having instant results,
Right.
when you should have aimed for like the more patient route.
It's like thinking like, oh, I should pick up that rake in the yard, and then you don't, and you step on it and it hits you in the face, and you're like, I'm pissed off about it, but also I should have known. Like, it's kind of funny in a way.
Right. That's better. Not what I said. The way you put it. That was what I meant. Yeah.
I just wrapped up what you said. I wouldn't have done it without you. No, I completely agree. I think that's exactly kind of like where he's at and where he's coming from. And I really enjoy it. I really enjoy what he does and what he becomes, even as dark as it is, and how it ties into Batman, this thing that I love so much, and kind of creates a new version of it. I'm not so protective of it that I'm like, it needs to do the same thing over and over, because that's what it is, and if it's not that, then it's not real. It's such a deep history and deep characters that I think it definitely can be spread out, and to say, you know, it could be this, it could be that. I like all of the Elseworld stuff where Martha is Joker and Thomas becomes Batman, and they have a conflict between them, and because Bruce died instead of them, and all of that stuff. They've told very interesting stories in the past that are nothing like what you know, and this is kind of just that same thing, that it's tied in, and it works, and it mostly ties into real life, and it works, and I love it. I think it's really good.
I really love this movie. I just think it's such a smart film. And like I said at the beginning, I understand some of people's aversion to it, because it's definitely not one that, it's not the movie that you have like a dinner party or a movie watch party, and you're like, you know what, group, let's watch Joker. Hey, because by the end of it, everyone's going to be like, all right.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's such a brilliant movie. I do have to ask you.
Okay.
When Arthur is walking down the hallway, it's the last shot of the film.
Yeah.
The bloody footprints.
Yeah.
How much of everything we've seen do you think he killed the new doctor? Or do you think it's just like...
Imagine killing
her, or the whole movie has just been in his head the whole time? What is your opinion on what's real, what's not, and what did he actually do?
I think that it's mostly real. I basically think the things that he showed to not be real are not real, and everything else is real, basically. So I think that he killed the Wall Street guys. I think that he killed Murray. I think that he kills his therapist, or at least gravely wounds his therapist, and then walks away and is happy about it. And bounces down the hallway. What do you think?
I'm with you. When I started seeing everyone like pointing out, I guess there's two shots of a clock, one at the beginning, one in the doctor's office, and then one in his clown preparation room at their lockers or whatever, the clocks have the same time. So people have been like, oh, the whole thing's in his head. I don't agree with that. I kind of think the clock thing was probably just like...
It's not a real clock that people use.
Well, it's like
nobody
it's
changed it.
It's one of those details that people are like, oops.
Yeah. Or the set dressing person's like, well, this time looks good. Let's just use that time, and didn't pay attention to that other time.
So I think the whole thing's real, except obviously what he kind of understands himself when you realize like she was never around. But I definitely have always taken it like, oh, he kills that therapist at the end. Like that's her blood. Now people have said there's no blood on him besides the soles of his feet. You don't see the front of him.
Yeah, right.
It's just his back the whole time. So who knows? I mean, the dude has blood on his face a handful of times throughout the film. But yeah, I'm totally like, I don't go down the theory rabbit holes that people do with it. I think, no, this dude, we watched the decline and fall of this guy, but he thinks it's like the better to reign in hell kind of mentality,
right?
That he has fully embraced. So
yeah.
I was just curious.
I don't have any chance of getting out of here, so I'm just gonna fuck shit up from inside.
Right. So I'm just
for as long as I'm alive, basically.
He's basically proven that if anyone has like a negative response or opinion about something he's doing or saying, he's okay with violence against you. He
totally
thinks it's beautiful. So
yeah, I agree for sure.
So what are your, I guess real quick, we'll just kind of bring it up. The sequel.
Yes. I was going to ask you that as well. I think the sequel is entirely unnecessary is my main complaint about it. And it feels like a forced sequel because, we made this movie on $55 million and it made $1 billion. Of course we're going to do a sequel, regardless of if we have a good script or a reason to do it, really. Now this is now a sub-property of a major property that we're going to get a bunch of people to buy tickets for. I think that I do also have concerns about the musical aspect of it, but if it's not like a full-on musical, if it's just like some musical scenes like the dance scenes in this one, I think that would be okay.
Yeah.
I think that even if they expand it some and it becomes Joker and Harley's shared delusion together, that's fine. I think that would be fine. I think that I don't love Lady Gaga like really ever in anything, so that is one of my bigger hangups. I know a lot of people love her, and good for you, but I don't care for her in any way, shape, or form. So I've huge reservations. She could certainly change my mind. I'm withholding judgment, I guess, but I tentatively am not a fan. Yeah, I think it's a good sign that Todd Phillips is still directing and still co-writing, and I think that's if it keeps the same style and look and cinematography and everything, it should be technically great. It really comes down to, I think, the story they end up with and whether it connects or not, and what it ends up being. I don't know enough about any of that to really have any expectations.
Yeah.
But I love the rest of the cast that they've announced in it. I love Brendan Gleeson. I love Ken Leung. I love Catherine Keener. I love Steve Coogan. It should be, I love Tim Dillon. It should be really funny and interesting to see where it goes. I would be shocked if it made $1 billion. I kind of expect maybe more around the 300 to 500 million mark max.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to have the same success at all.
No.
Yeah, I'm with you. I remember when Joker came out, and it was like immediately people were talking sequel.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you and I had talked like it's not that kind of movie. It's not like this needs to be franchised. Like the character Joker is already a part of one of the biggest franchises in history.
Mm-hmm.
Don't need to franchise this solo thing, like
Mm-hmm.
this spin-off. So very unnecessary. I'm still very worried about the musical aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an aversion to Lady Gaga. I think my favorite thing she's done was A Star Is Born with Bradley Cooper. She's awesome in that. She's fantastic. And that movie's just really, really fucking good. But I can't help but feel like when they announced that it was going to be a musical, people were like, oh, that's got to be a weird Hollywood rumor. And then she was announced as Harley Quinn, and it was like, well, I feel like that just cemented that it is a musical.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's just because it's Lady Gaga, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
I am most worried that once again we're going to have a young generation of people romanticizing these characters.
Yeah. That's definitely a risk.
I am, and especially with Gaga playing Harley Quinn, I'm very worried about that because I
Yeah.
think
I think the style of them, the aesthetic of them is what people are attracted to, regardless of the actual substance. And yeah, I think it's going to be the same problem all over again.
I'm very worried about that, and that's a little sad. And I feel like they've kept the basis of the story quiet for so long that it makes me worried what the story's going to be. Whereas with Joker, Todd Phillips was very open from the get-go of like, no, we're making a film that's like about mental illness. Like this is dangers of society abandoning each other and themselves and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with the sequel, it's been like, it's a musical.
Mm-hmm. And what does that mean?
Like, but like Joker had a purpose and it was great and effective. This one feels like it doesn't have a purpose.
Well, it's hard to judge when we don't know the purpose yet.
It's true. It's true.
It probably does have some purpose, but that purpose could be off or weird or the opposite of what the first one tried to do, or
Right.
or completely undercut it or something. I do have a weird hang up with, in the trailer, all of the shots of Lady Gaga and Harley Quinn are, she seems to be a patient at Arkham. And
Instead of
in
the
my
doctor.
in my weird comic book brain, I'm like, no, she's the doctor first.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, but it's Joker, I have to suspend that. And I don't know, I didn't have that problem with the first one, but in this one with their relationship, it probably will make sense on screen, but on paper, I'm like, she should be a doctor and treating him and all of that normal stuff.
Right. Like that's kind of, yeah, because he uses a lot of manipulation against her when she's a doctor, and that's where her infatuation with him starts to come from. And see, kids, not healthy. Not
Mhm.
healthy. If your relationship is starting with manipulation, red flags, folks.
Yes.
Don't romanticize it. Don't fantasize about that. That's a bad thing. Stay away from it. So, yeah, I know I put it on my movie draft. I don't think it's going to be near as successful. I think it's going to be really polarizing.
Yeah.
And I'm very concerned. I'm going to see it like opening weekend. I mean, I'm just going to. But
yeah. I think it's maybe the kind of movie that it would be better to see before you start hearing the polarization.
Yeah.
So you can judge it for yourself.
Yeah. But yeah, it still feels just like, why?
Yeah. Yeah, it is, I think, completely unnecessary. The first one is such a perfect open and shut story.
Yeah. So,
But
but we'll find
see.
out.
We might change our tune in a couple of weeks and be like, yeah, that was even better than the first one, or a worthy follow-on that extends it and makes the first one even better. That happens sometimes, so we'll wait and see.
Yep. So I'll see it with an open mind. It'll just be weird when the first song number kicks in, and I'll be like, this.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let us know, I guess, what you think. If you're excited about the new one or not, and why or why not. And then also what you think of Joker, if there's anything we missed, any major things you want to talk about. You can, of course, find us on Instagram and everywhere else. YouTube, feel free, drop us comments.
It's true.
Spotify even, I think, generally has a thing that says, hey, what did you think? I try to customize those for each episode. So, yeah, let us know. I want to hear from you, of course. And then next episode, I think since Joker Folie Deux just came out, the next big movie to come out is Alien Romulus.
Yep.
And so we're doing an episode about kind of everything you need to know leading up to that, because they've said that it takes place after the original Alien, which means it also takes place after Prometheus and Covenant and the original Alien. So we're catching you up on the first three movies, and I think we're going to have a special guest on that episode too.
I think that's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. If that falls through, ignore what I just said. We haven't recorded it yet, but that's still the plan.
It's true. Yeah, very excited for that. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited about Alien Romulus. After seeing that trailer, I was like, I think all of my misgivings of this have been lifted, and now I'm very excited. I originally was like, dear God, another Alien movie?
Yeah, I have to concur with that. I think the thing that makes me the most excited is, like, the first teaser looked cool, but I was like, I'm still a little reserved on facehuggers, like, running and chasing and jumping, but I guess they technically do that in the originals. But in the new trailer, there's that shot of the xenomorph. It's his head, and it's like lifting it up off of the ground or whatever with all the slime and the growl. And I was like, oh, that's practical. And that put a big smile on my face. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen awesome stuff about the practical face huggers, like running around as like robotics and stuff. I'm like, that's going to be pretty cool. So I'm excited.
Way to go back to the OG. And I am excited for the director. If you've ever watched Don't Breathe, you know the dude knows. He does tension very well. So very excited for it.
Yeah. Fede Alvarez has done quite a bit of cool stuff. And I liked the Evil Dead remake of 2013.
Yeah.
He's done really cool horror type stuff. So I think this is the next expansion
a good
of that.
step for him.
Yeah, should be. Okay, so look forward to that. Let us know. And if you join the fan club, there's a bunch of bonus episodes out there for you to check out.
True.
And
there's some fun stuff out there for you.
And you can also join the clubhouse and talk to us about them. So
it's true.
Go do that. And we'll see you next time, I guess.
Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated.
Yep. Thank you. Love you. Appreciate you. See you next time.
Bye.